Welcome to HortTube. My name is Jim Putnam. This is the January garden checklist video. I do one of these each month just to kind of talk through what I do in my garden. The one from 2 years ago now, actually, this is the third time I've done this in January. It's probably the most detailed of all of these that I've ever done. I've kind of narrowed them down now to what I have going on in my garden here in Raleigh, North Carolina, Zone 7B. We can still plant here in the South. We can plant right through the winter, and as long as it's a hardy plant and as long as it hasn't been in a greenhouse, I can stick it in the ground. So I'll continue to do that. I only have a few holes left in this landscape project, to find places to put things. But again, this is a good time of year to be doing it, really. My only caution would be if something came, like I said, out of a greenhouse. And so you could frequently find that this time of year. If you go and shop for a plant and it's got a ton of new growth on it, that's probably not a plant that I'm going to introduce to my garden in January. Although I am in short sleeves and shorts, you'll notice that. It is abnormally warm this particular year. But again, make sure the plant's actually acclimated to the outdoors before it goes in. The other thing I don't plant in the dead of winter are dormant grasses. Grasses that go completely back dormant. So grass-like things that keep their foliage, that would be, something like liriope or a carex that aren't technically grasses, but they are grass-like. They have foliage on them and you can put those in the ground. But the ones that are completely dormant, I have bad success with. Also, extremely wet days. This time of year, if it snowed recently or something like that, I don't want to dig a hole and have it fill up with water and then plant a plant in it. So, but other than that, plant away. You can typically find bare root roses, bare root fruit trees, those kinds of things this time of year. Definitely time to put those in the ground. I've got a few holes in where I put my pansies and violas and snapdragons in. And if I can find a few packs here or there that match enough, I'll go back and plug those in. The garden centers may still, and box stores may still have those at this point. If you can find any bulbs left on the shelf, you can probably get a pretty good deal on them right here at the end of December, and you can go ahead and put them in the ground. If you're putting tulips here in the South, you may want to put them in the refrigerator for a few weeks before you put them in the ground. But I think you can probably find some deals on some of those spring flowering bulbs. The dead of winter is also peak transplanting time, so I just put up a video transplanting this butterfly bush. It was a little closer out here toward the lawn. I just slid it back, took out another shrub in the process. It's that I need to transplant to the front yard, a hydrangea here. So if you have things that need to be moved around in the garden, this is definitely the time to do it. And I explained that pretty thoroughly in that video, and I cut this back hard when I moved it. I think a little bit of pruning on the top of a plant when you're, I'm cutting roots off, so let's cut some of the top off as well to balance it back out is a good idea. It's a little early for some general pruning, and on pruning in general, know what you have, because if you start pruning off things that you could be pruning off spring flowers. This butterfly bush blooms on new growth, so the fact that I cut it back is going to have no impact whatsoever on it flowering this coming summer. But a lot of things in your landscape already have the flower buds on them, so be careful with that. So here we are at the end of December, and typically my cool season fall vegetable garden would have been knocked back and I would have cleared it out by now. Generally, I'll put some leaves into this space just to keep it covered for the winter time. But it's been so abnormally warm, I'm still harvesting lots of things, including just tons of broccoli. It stayed so warm so long that broccoli just keeps on giving here. It's beautiful, actually. Got a ton of it out here. I'll come back around and collect that in a minute. I'm actually about 2 weeks away from starting my cool season vegetable seeds again. I do all my seeds inside. You can direct sow a lot of those things. You can direct sow beets, you can direct sow lettuce, kale, lots of it. If you're going to direct seed it, I'm in zone 7, so I'm speaking for zone 7 right this minute. I can direct sow those things toward the end of January. I'm going to start them again. I'm going to start them from seed in the house, get a head start on them, and then I'll put them in the ground somewhere, maybe February 15th or something like that. I'll put my starts in the ground sometime between now and then. This broccoli will be harvested, the kale, whatever the remaining lettuce is in here will be harvested, and I will put some leaves over top of this. my vegetable garden here, I just typically will put a thin layer of compost on it each turnover, each season, and that gets mixed in when the plants get planted. It's basically a no-till method. You don't need a big giant vegetable garden like this to do this. I've also got beautiful lettuce growing in a container on my back porch, and you can see how healthy and happy this is. This is just lettuce growing directly in compost, and that's actually garlic. These are garlic bulbs that are growing in this container as well. So you can get a bulb. You can do decorative bulbs too. I could grow daffodils in here with my lettuce if I wanted to, but I'm choosing to grow garlic instead. So those of us, again, in the South, you know, we have an opportunity here to grow food, you know, through typically not in the dead of winter like right now, but certainly through fall, and then prepping in January for another early season, February, March, April period of time with these cool season vegetables. So some maintenance items to be thinking about during the winter time. We definitely don't want grass to be covered in leaves. If you have nice turf, you want to continue to keep the leaves off. You know, on breezy days here, even though the leaves have pretty much dropped off the trees, I still get a few out here, so I'll come through here occasionally and rake these off of the turf. This particular winter, I've got a few marginal plants in this landscape, and they're not fully dormant because we've only had a couple nights that were really and they were in the upper 20s really. We haven't had a night that really put everything to sleep. And so there are a couple things back here. In fact, some things still have new growth on them. I've got calla lilies with flowers on them. It's just kind of absolutely wild. I might pull out a frost protection blanket on a couple of things if we were going to jump down here really quickly down into 20 or the teens or something like that. So normally I don't worry about it because at this point the temperatures have gotten cold enough, the plants are dormant enough. But again, this winter you may want to look around. If there's something that just seems like it's still trying to grow, you might want to think about protecting it later. Another thing that goes along with protecting plants is keeping the ground covered. You know, protecting the roots from cold is just as important as protecting the top of the plant from cold. So make sure the ground's covered. Mulch, leaves, you know, whatever. Doesn't matter. If you use pine straw, it doesn't matter. Just keep the ground covered because that is an insulator. Also helps regulate the water and also cuts down on these winter weeds. So we're going to have a chickweed. January, February is when we have our chickweed explosion, and henbit absolutely go wild. Henbit has the little purple flowers on it in the late winter. Chickweed has the little white flowers on it, and you know, it just goes absolutely wild. Keeping the ground covered right now will prevent a lot of those things. It'll also prevent some of your spring weeds from germinating, being able to have light and air to germinate as we get closer into, you know, mid-March is probably when those summer weeds start to germinate. So keep the ground covered. There's a lot of good reasons to keep the ground covered. I have lots of containers throughout my landscape. This is another thing about winter protection, potentially. This holly is hardy in zone 6 to 9, something like that. And here I am in zone 7. We lose a couple zones of hardiness when something is raised up above the ground because the roots are exposed to that. So if I have something, this one's probably okay, but if I have something that's barely hardy here, those are things I want to consider with the temperature. Again, if it drops quickly because these plants aren't completely asleep this year. If you fertilize with something like Osmocote, like prills, you know, if you have little prills sitting on top of your soil in your containers, you might want to flush the fertilizer sometime during the winter. We don't have to do as much watering in these containers. And what we had to do at the nursery was occasionally take the covers off of everything, or maybe they weren't covered, and turn the water on and actually irrigate for a little while to flush some of that fertilizer out. That fertilizer from those prills builds up in that container through the winter. So flush them once a winter. Also, be just checking on the watering. I mean, most of the ground space in my landscape, I don't have to water much this time of year, but the containers do continue to dry out. I'm not doing any fertilizing during January on anything. I don't want to push anything in the landscape. You'll see fertilizing video in February. I will start to push my pansies a little bit, you know, in February and March to really get them to fill out. They're blooming now, but they'll grow super, super fast at the beginning of February, and I'll fertilize those then. Toward the end of February, I'll fertilize my containers, my shrubs, trees, everything that's in the ground. So let's do a quick follow-up on pruning. I don't really do a lot of pruning until February typically, and I'm super cautious with what I'm pruning at that time because I don't want to prune anything that's going to bloom in the spring. But non-flowering things, if you've got boxwoods, hollies, that kind of thing, that's a February kind of pruning thing for me. This is where it gets confusing, and what I want you to know is you need to know what you have, because I got a Sarcocoa over here to my right that's budded up. It blooms in the late winter. Tiny little flowers, but they're super fragrant. Definitely don't want to be pruning that now. They'll be pruned after they flower. I've got an azalea to my left, budded up big time. This thing's going to be flowering in March and into early April. It'll get pruned after that. Perennials that have died completely back to the ground, you can go ahead and prune them back. I've got a salvia in front of me that's been pruned back at this point because it had died completely back. So again, it's about knowing what you have, identifying what you have, and then looking it up and determining whether it's a winter pruning thing or an after flowering thing. If you just prune everything after it flowers, you won't have an issue. So, write that down if you need to. Prune after flowering and you'll be fine. But you can do some winter pruning if you know what it is. One pruning thing I always do this time of year is cut back my the old growth on my hellebores. These are so newly planted that this growth doesn't look tattered, but you'll notice some of the old growth will look very tattered. I cut those pieces all the way back to the middle of the plant in January, and you can see here in my area, they're already waking back up, already thinking about flowering. And so this is the time of year to clean them up. And they'll look a lot better, and they'll also put a lot more energy into their flowering. Here's some other things I'm thinking about during January. Plants have been very hard to find for the last 2 years. If you have a local garden center that you really like, I would consider going over to them when they're open here in January and seeing if they can locate some of the plants that you may be looking for. This is the time of year they're going to shows. Literally, nursery show season is upon us, and this is the time of year they might be able to find some of the things. And you showing interest in it might be, be the thing that makes them go and order it if they see it at some nursery when they're at a trade show. Also, we need to order seeds. So whatever summer seeds you're going to have for your vegetable garden or your annuals, perennials. Again, my cool season vegetables, I already have those seeds. Definitely go ahead and order them. Seed catalogs are coming through the mail. The Baker Creek seed catalog's beautiful if you don't get that one. And Johnny Seed, Park Seed, those are some of them that I order order seeds from. I'd go ahead and do that because there's been a shortage for the last couple of years. This is the time to take a look around the garden and do some planning. If you want to add some screening plants to close in the space a little bit this next year. Plan those spaces out and then go to a garden center and start doing some shopping, or go to it's a great time of year to go to an arboretum because the things that are awake and are doing a good job of screening in December are probably the plants that you'd want as your screening plants. And just planning, laying out beds, using a water hose and redefining, how your turf is going to look. You can use the hose to bend around and just planning. Hardscape, this is a great time of year to do hardscaping. So this, I've got all kinds of hardscape projects I hope to get to during these winter months. And again, it's a great time of year to be doing it. It's typically easier to dig in slightly moist soil. It's unfrozen soil, obviously, in January than it is other times of the year, and it's just easier to have a coat on that you can take off when you get hot, rather than be on a 95-degree day during the summer. Lastly, January is a great month to do tool maintenance, so tool sharpening and cleaning. I need to change the oil in my mower. I didn't do a very good job of that all year last year, so I need to sharpen the blade on my mower and get it done. I need to pull everything out of the shed and rearrange it. I'm not showing you the inside of it right now. It's literally a disaster. This has been a 2-year project. I closed a nursery, and then I closed a garden center, and then I sold a house, and This shed has, and then did this landscape project. This place is a disaster. I need to pull everything out and reorganize it. So what better month to do that than January? So thank you guys very much for following along with these monthly checklist videos. I'll be back in February. By then, again, I will have started my cool season spring vegetables that I'm doing from seed in the house, and there'll be videos for that. So subscribe to follow along. Thanks for watching.